Hey guys, um, I had oh, I had an idea about how your typical MBTI cognitive functions could potentially be viewed and couched in neuroscience. Um, I am a materialist when it comes to cognition and consciousness, and I think that much of how we think and view the world is determined by neurochemistry and specific neurotransmitter balances and imbalances. And I think much of personality is tied to these neurochemical roots. And, I had an idea about how the cognitive functions could be associated with neurotransmitters, like NESE being action interfacing functions being maybe associated with dopamine, and TI maybe being associated also with dopamine, TE being associated with some balance of serotonin and dopamine, SI being associated with serotonin, SE, I already talked about SE, NI being associated with maybe GABA and serotonin and dopamine, uh, and FE maybe being associated with dopamine as well, and FI being associated with some balance of serotonin and dopamine. I don't know. I don't actually have a theory about how we might correlate neurotransmitters with cognitive functions. Regardless, I still think it's an interesting thought to couch um, MBTI in neuroscience, and perhaps types can be defined by specific neurochemical concentrations in their brains, and um, and that's an interesting idea, right? Because MBTI is a cognitive typology system, very much leans on uh, looking at models of cognition and how cognition works, and how different world approaches and worldviews and different cognitive approaches work in people's minds. And perhaps we could couch this in neuroscience by finding correlations between neurotransmitter concentrations uh, and the cognitive functions. And so it's definitely an interesting idea. I really don't know if it holds water, um, but certainly everything psychological is also physical. Physical processes, organic, physical, and biochemical processes in the brain give rise to certain forms of cognition. And so um, maybe there is something to be said there about that. Maybe it's an interesting idea. I don't know. I studying this really wouldn't be very difficult. You just have to find a way to study people's cognition, while engaging in a specific cognitive function, and then try to find if there's any neurotransmitter associations there. Um, yeah, so that's my idea. Maybe people in the MBTI community have ideas about this too, or have thought about how MBTI could be couched in neuroscience, which seems to me to be a pretty important effort, because we, if we could do that, then we could find interesting correlations. And you know, it's not to say much. It's not to say that it's all reducible to neurochemistry, but much is reducible to neurochemistry if you take the materialist reductionist approach. And yeah, so maybe it's an interesting idea. I don't know. I mean, uh, the thing is the correlations I've posited uh, come from probably a minuscule understanding of how neurotransmitters work and all the different types of neurotransmitters. I've only mentioned, for instance, like GABA, serotonin, and dopamine primarily, but you could also implicate acetylcholine and testosterone and other hormones and yada yada yada. Perhaps we'd be able to map over cognitive functions onto neurotransmitters in some way, and couch this in neuroscience. Dario Nardi has attempted to do that with electrical patterns in the brain, but maybe you could also do it on the level of chemistry rather than just the level of physics and electricity. Um, so I had that idea a while back, and I was going to stream about it, but I totally forgot about it. So it came to me again today, and maybe people have some thoughts about how these could be correlated. Um, yeah. Again, if and it's, I don't know, the proposition is itself a bit reductionist, and if you're not a reductionist, well, you probably deride it, but regardless, it could still contain some interesting truths as a theory and some interesting sense as a theory. Thank you for watching.